Welcome back to College Football Addiction. I've got Spencer McLaughlin, Locked On Ducks, chatting with us today, man. How you doing?
Doing wonderfully because it's college football season and there's no better time, truly. Except the only downside is last night it was pitch black by like 7:50, and that means I can no longer tee off at 5 o'clock in the evening, play 18 holes of golf, and that's a bummer. But everything else, 10 out of 10.
Yeah, I saw that 57 straight days we get football. So last night, the last night that I had to pretend to care about baseball, as that being the only thing that was on TV.
I tuned out of baseball once the Mariners made it utterly clear that they were not serious about being a playoff team this year, because why would we do that?
Yeah, that's too much to ask. All right, let's jump into it. Game this weekend, actually this week on Friday night, 9 p.m. Eastern kick against Michigan State, first Big Ten game. Before we look at the game, everybody expected 4-0, so maybe that's not a surprise. Maybe the path they've taken to get there surprised people, the closer games with Idaho and Boise State, and then certainly better against the rivalry in Oregon State and then UCLA. How would you describe the mood right now in Eugene and around the program?
Yeah, technically the second Big Ten game ever, but the first actual Big Ten
That's a
game,
fake
because
Big Ten game.
like playing UCLA with a different logo. Like, come on, that's not the first real Big Ten game. But this Friday night is, and Sparty hasn't been to Eugene since 2014. That was a top 10 matchup, and I don't expect this one to be as competitive. I think Sparty can hang around for a half, maybe even a little longer than that. I don't think they can go 4 quarters with the Ducks. And I think the mood around Oregon going into this game is, okay, 2 games in a row where we feel really good, and then the game number 2 where afterwards it was, well, that wasn't very good. Why wasn't that as good as it should have been? Now Oregon fans kind of look at it going, Boise State might just be really good. They could just be a really good football team. I think they're going to win at least 10 regular season games this year. And yeah, should Oregon have been able to win that game by double digits? Absolutely. They made too many mistakes. They almost made a big mistake dropping the ball at the goal line. They fumbled the ball when they were driving up 7. They fumbled the ball after allowing a touchdown on the next play following that first fumble. Like, they were just not in sync. And I think what you've seen from Oregon in the last couple of games is they have been in sync, aside from a Dillon Gabriel pick 6 that made the UCLA game look a lot closer than it was. The yardage in that game, I think, was like 430 to 180. Like, it was not a close competitive football game after the first quarter. So I think Oregon feels solid, and certainly Duck fans can get another level of confidence if they go into Friday night's game and they beat Michigan State by 20, 30 points, which they're capable of. I think that for Oregon, with the Ohio State game looming, they have to avoid the look-ahead factor. That's a real thing. That's a real thing. I think we see it in college football. No one would ever admit it, discuss it openly, but like, when you look at a team and go, wait, why'd they lose that game? Oh, they were looking ahead. And guys can say, no, we were focused on this week. They look ahead. They look ahead. They know. So I think Oregon fans feel solid right now and can take another step towards forgetting the horrific week 1 game against Idaho, which was still a win, thankfully, if they beat Michigan State soundly.
Overall thoughts on the way that Gabriel has performed, certainly better lately, but just overall, is he about what you've expected? Is he a little bit better, a little bit worse than what you were thinking coming into the year?
He's exactly what I expected. He's an efficient distributor of the football. He's not perfect all the time. Nobody is. He threw his first interception last week, and it was a bad read. It was a bad throw. It was a bad everything. Like, he should have just thrown the ball out of the back of the end zone. Oregon kicks field goal, and then UCLA never scores a touchdown and makes that game even close. To as close as it was, which was to say not very close and competitive. Oregon was up 28-3 when Gabriel threw the pick 6 with 15 seconds left in the first half. But that, along with the fumble against Boise State, which was half on him, but also partially on the center, and Oregon's made changes along the offensive line to shore that up. Gabriel's been exactly what I expect him to be. He's an efficient, effective distributor of the football. He's making good reads. He rarely puts the ball in harm's way. Again, outside of that one pick, he has not thrown a dangerous football where you're like, oh, man, that could have been picked off. Like, he's had a couple tight window throws, but I never felt like he was making the wrong read or the wrong decision. So I like what I've seen from him so far. The quarterback run has been more of a factor over the last couple of games, and that's been a feature of Dillon Gabriel's games for the last several years, as he's been a college quarterback since 2012. And I think that for Gabriel, he's just got so many weapons around him that he's able to just kind of sit back there and not lock onto one guy. Like you could predict every game Tez Johnson's going to lead Oregon in receiving yards. You might be right more often than not, but you'd have a tough time predicting who's going to be number two. Is it going to be Terrence Ferguson, the tight end? Is it going to be Trayshawn Holden? Is it going to be Evan Stewart? Evan Stewart and Tez Johnson, the only guys to lead Oregon in receiving yards in a game so far this year. But I think that's a function of the way that Gabriel's playing. He's not saying, okay, I'm throwing this ball to Tez Johnson no matter what. He's sitting there and he's seen a lot of defenses and a lot of football going, okay, I think I want to go with the football here. Nope, that's not there. Come off of that. And he doesn't force the ball. He just executes the offense. And he and Will Stein, the offense coordinator, I think have developed a really nice rhythm over the last couple of games.
You mentioned the look ahead and how that is a very real thing, and how we sometimes look back and say, like, well, it makes sense why you dropped this game. I do. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or give me your take on this. I do think with somebody that's as intense as Dan Lanning, who has coached at places where you play multiple big games back to back to back in the SEC, like I do worry about it less in this specific situation. Michigan State also just not being very good. Like if this was a game where you're playing somebody that you're like a 10-point favorite against, maybe it's a bigger deal. But I expect it to have less of an impact this week, just due to the coach, due to it being at home, due to the opponent. So I don't know. Thoughts around that?
I think Dan Lanning has done a good job for the most part, which is why the Idaho game was so surprising, of having Oregon play to a standard, not to the level of their competition, which is, I think, a point of great relief for Oregon fans who got used to that in the Mario Cristobal era, where, and Mario's Miami team has, until Virginia Tech, kind of bucked that trend, but they always have a tendency to play up or down to whoever they're playing. But Dan Lanning has yet to lose a game to an unranked opponent in his tenure with the Ducks. He's only lost 5 games overall, and I don't expect that to resume this Friday night at Autzen Stadium. But I think that Lanning has done a good job of making sure that these games are not uncomfortable late. And yeah, Boise State was more uncomfortable than it needed to be because of a little sloppiness, but Boise State is a good team. Idaho, a really good FCS team, but still, that game never should have been close. But that was a bad game, and that was week 1. I think they've worked out those kinks. They've shuffled their offensive line around and really settled on that unit, and I think he's made a lot of really good adjustments, and his teams have progressed over the course of the season. And you look at even last year, the way that they responded after the loss to Washington, got off to a slow start against Wazoo, but then turned it on and won the game comfortably. And they didn't play a competitive game again until they faced Washington in the Pac-12 championship game. And I think that's a testament to where Dan Lanning and his coaching staff are at, is they know how to push the right buttons for these Oregon players, how to get them in the right mindset and make sure that they are not undervaluing an opponent, that they are playing up to the way that they're capable of. And I think Michigan State should be another example of that.
Speaking on them specifically, they do turn the ball over quite a bit.
Yes.
Tops in the some of the highest turnovers that you see in the Big Ten. Do you expect Oregon to pressure pretty heavily? I mean, defensively, I'd be shocked if they didn't just absolutely get after that side of the ball to try and take advantage of that.
Well, I don't know if they're going to line up and just blitz everybody necessarily and go Wink Martindale at Michigan, where it's like, hey, it's 3rd and 7. What are you going to do? I'm going to run cover 0. And then the next time when you're in 3rd and 4, I'm going to run cover 0 again. And then when you get to your next 3rd and 10, I'm going to run cover 0 again. That's not the way that Dan Lanning's and Tosh Lupoi's defenses have played over the last couple of seasons. They will have times where they play coverage because they can get pressure with 4, and they should be able to in this football game. With the way Oregon's defense has played this year, particularly against the pass, I'd be surprised if they don't have at least one interception of Aiden Childs, who's already tossed 8 of them this year through 5 games. Now, a couple were against Boston College, and the weather was really bad, and I haven't checked the forecast for Friday night in Eugene. I assume it's going to be at least better than what they had back east. But I think that for Oregon's defense, they have done a good job. I don't think they've recovered a fumble yet, but they have made life really difficult for opposing quarterbacks. They're pressuring with the defensive line. They're drawing up some blitzes every now and then for linebackers like Jeff Boss and Bryce Betcher, and then the secondary is playing at a really high level. I think they are playing even better than I thought they might at this point in the season. Still looking to see if the safeties have playmaking ability in the pass game, and maybe a guy like Nick Marsh can challenge them a little bit this week. But so far, the primary cover guys in man-to-man situations, Jabbar Muhammad and Nico Reed, Dante Manning, Brandon Johnson, they've been really, really good Have they faced an elite receiving core? No, but Boise State's got a capable one. I think Michigan State's is okay. UCLA has got a good receiving core, just not a great quarterback. But I think Oregon's defense has looked the way that Duck fans have wanted it to so far. I think they forced at least 2 turnovers in this game.
I've got a quick one, then we'll get a prediction. We'll get you out of here. What is there anything that Michigan State does that kind of worries you in this game outside of Oregon just go out and playing their game and not looking ahead? Like, is there one matchup that you're kind of like, this is one that if they were able to exploit this, we'd have some concern?
I'd say the running game, it hasn't been great for Michigan State this year. It hasn't been terrible. The script here for Michigan State is what Jonathan Smith's old team did a couple weeks ago in Corvallis, and that is run the ball, take the air out of it, kill the clock, limit possessions, play ball control, and execute situationally. Oregon State did that for a half, and they were trailing 22-14. They got a lot of help from a really, really bad call from the officials, but then Oregon's defense wasn't able to get a stop from there and hold them to a field goal, so you're only up 8 going into the half. Then in the second half, Oregon State didn't score. This game could look very similar to that. That game was on the road. This is at home. Michigan State probably has a higher overall talent level than the Spartans do, but there's a lot more continuity on that Oregon State team, and that's not a bad Oregon State team. Oregon's their only loss so far this year. They beat Purdue out of the Big Ten handily at home, so I like what I've seen from Oregon's run defense outside of Ashton Genty. I don't know if anybody can tackle that guy. Certainly Washington State wasn't able to. Nobody else that they've played has been able to yet. I still hold that in the back of my mind because if you're trying to be one of the top 5 teams in college football, I know Genty's great. I know Boise State's good and a contender in the Mountain West, and they'll push for a playoff spot. Do you think he goes into Columbus and runs for 192 yards and 3 touchdowns? The answer is no.
No.
But I think that if Oregon has taken the steps forward that we've seen against Oregon State and UCLA against the run, that'll show up again against Michigan State. But that's the thing that concerns me is the formula going to play itself out for Michigan State? Because what Jonathan Smith left in Corvallis, a lot of what he's doing, it's the same. It's going to look the exact same. It's just a matter of whether Oregon can play it well.
Do you have a lean in this? Have you made a prediction yet? How do you think this thing goes down?
Yeah, I think this one is closer than Oregon fans want it to be in the first half, but I do think Oregon, I don't think it's uncomfortable in the first half. I do think that Michigan State is within 10 to 14 points. You're kind of like, that was okay. And then I think Oregon has been tremendous in their second half adjustments so far this season, and I think that continues as well. So I've got Oregon 38-10, but I wouldn't be surprised if this is only like 14-3 at the half or 17-6 or like, somewhere in that sort of range where you're like, okay, I feel fine about how Oregon's doing, but they haven't put their foot on the gas pedal just yet. It would be really encouraging with Ohio State looming next week if you come out and just step on Michigan State from the jump and play well start to finish, obviously. But I think Jonathan Smith is a really, really good head coach. He has bested Dan Lanning once before. He's not going to do it here, but certainly he could make things a little bit tense at Autzen.
Awesome. Spencer, where can people follow you? Where can they find your several shows, your many things you do?
YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts, Locked On College Football, Locked On Ducks, Monday through Friday, all year round, and they've got bonus shows as well, reaction shows on the weekends when available. I also do play-by-play for Southern Utah University on ESPN Plus, and on the radio I travel and call games on KSUB as well. So I got plenty. I'm a busy man during football season. busy man, but great to come on with you.
Yeah, no, thank you a ton for spending some time with us. Big one on Friday night, and then an even bigger one next week. So
the big one next week.
Game day, big noon, everything. I'm sure going out that way.
Should be there.
So thank you a ton, man, for joining and hanging out.
Anytime.